Well, welcome back to the Sina Good Health Podcast. It's been a while, but I'm excited to get back into it. I'm once again with Rachel. Last time we did a podcast about how should emotions impact your performance, and we went deep on a lot of stuff. So I highly recommend you watch it. There'll be a link down below. Today we're going to go deeper on one of the things we talked about last time, which is the, I don't know if there's a term for it, but like using a magnet and emotional release in water. So Rachel, do you want to give us a recap about what that is?
Sure, yeah. General overall recap is going to be essentially understanding that your body is made up of water and water can carry memories. And using that to your advantage, it's understanding that emotions each carry their own frequency. And so each frequency can get lodged in different areas of your body. Could be in an organ, could be in different areas of your body, and then it's stuck there, and that actually causes a blockage or a bump or a problem when it comes to free flow of energy through your body. And so your natural capability to perform and respond to life as normal or as your true self becomes difficult in that type of situation. So the idea is to use the emotion code, the book, The Emotion Code, and then the Body Code is the next book after that, as a tool basis to start with releasing emotions. I just call it an emotion release. Just kind of find what they are. It's a lot less labor intensive than going through and dredging up your entire history in like a
conventional therapy.
Yeah. It's because you don't necessarily need to know everything about the emotion to release it. It's mostly just your body, your subconscious is going to start telling you that there is nervousness somewhere in your body and it's stuck. Do I need to know anything about it? Your body will say yes or no. If it says no, you're like, awesome. I don't know what this is, but I'm going to release it. And that's when the magnet comes in and it starts to kind of repolarize those ions in the water and that's in your body.
Yeah. So a couple things I wanted to bring up, both for you and viewers to kind of help get us into the right headspace of understanding what the hell we're talking about, is so Jessica from How to ADHD has a video where she's talking about processing grief when her mom died. And something a therapist told her was, if you think about grief as you've got a button in a box and there's a ball in there, so as you're kind of moving around through life, the ball will hit the button and you'll feel the grief. And as time passes and you heal, the button doesn't go away, but the box gets bigger, so it's less frequent for the triggers to happen. So that can be kind of a helpful way, I think, to think about what we're talking about with holding on to emotions. And then another thing was, and you talked about the emotion code and the body code. Another book that I've got downloaded, I haven't read yet, is, I think there's two different ones that are pretty similar. It's The Body Keeps Score or The Body Remembers. And it's basically about how, like what Rachel was saying, the body will remember past trauma, injuries, etc. There's a story somebody was telling me about the book said where I think it was an Olympic runner, I think female, and she pulled a hamstring while she was doing a lap, and like the next Olympics, they showed the play-by-play of both years, and in the exact same spot, she had that kind of spasm thing because the body remembered that injury. So I think that helps kind of set the framework of what we're talking about. Thematically, what we're going to go over today is kind of how to kind of decode and be able to listen to yourself and figure out what you're kind of holding on to. So with the emotional release technique that you're talking about, there's a set of questions as a template. Do you want to touch on, like, how do you know the right questions to ask?
Sure. You're essentially communicating with yourself. So you ask, is there an emotion to release first, every time? Because you never know. You're like, yes, of course there's an emotion to release. Well, that's your ego telling you that there's not actually your subconscious responding. So you have to be like, truly relaxed, your brain as turned off as possible, your body relaxed. I usually stand up close to a wall and then I sway forwards or backwards with the answer, and that tells me yes or no. Either way, you ask, what do I have an emotion to release? And then inside of the emotion code book, there's actually a chart that puts most generalized emotions into columns A and B, and then rows 1 through 6. And so there's 2 boxes in each A or B.
I'll put a slide up of the chart too.
Yeah.
Make it easy.
Yeah, it makes it easy. And then if you go through and understand why he chose those emotions, if you want to be specific, be like, okay, but it's like this, then you can go through and read his description of each emotion. Anyway, so you use the chart. The second question is this emotion, and assuming that the answer is yes, there is an emotion to release, then you ask, okay, is this emotion in column A? It takes out half the stuff right away. If it's like, yes, okay, cool. You don't have to ask, is this emotion in column B? Then, or if it says no, then you would go and say, yes, is this emotion in column B? Figure out if it's A or B. And then you go into the rows. Usually, I like to ask, is this in rows 1, 3, or 5? Because that's, again, eliminating half of the emotions that we have on the table at one time. And then you would say, if it says no, okay, cool, is this emotion in rows 1, 2, 4, or 6? And it's like, yes, okay, cool. So we know it's in 2, 4, or 6A. So we only have 3 questions that are specific, and each box has 5 or 6 emotions in it anyways. So it's like, okay, is this emotion in 2A? No. Okay. Is this emotion in 4A? Yes. Awesome. So we don't even need to ask if this emotion is in 6A. Sometimes I do, just to like triple check myself, make sure I'm not, again, in ego. And then of course it'll be like, no, of course, because it's in 4A. Then you go into the box 4A and you ask, is this emotion this? Is this emotion this, based on what's in that box? I don't have it fully memorized, so
yeah.
I can't tell you exactly what's in the box. But then you would go through each specific emotion. Then, when you decide it's, let's see, no, this is in 2A, so we'll pretend it's in 2A. Nervousness is in 2A, as is worrying, anxiety. That kind of is a box that deals with that kind of thing. So we'll pretend it was yes in 2A. Okay, so you say, is this nervousness? No. Okay. Is this anxiety? Yes. Okay. Do I need to know more about this anxiety? That's the next question you ask. It's like, yes, you do. Okay. Then you kind of have to start troubleshooting a little bit more. It's like, okay, I have the emotion anxiety. It's stuck somewhere, and we can usually guess, I believe that's in the lungs. Anxiety, I believe, is lungs, and it's associated with certain organs. And then you have to know more about it in order for your body to release it fully. Okay, cool. So you can start with, is this anxiety from this week? Is this anxiety from this month? Is this anxiety? And 80% of the time, I would say, usually it pops to mind right away. It's like, oh, that's what I'm anxious about right now. So then you could ask, is this because of my job right now? We'll pretend, you know. I was like, yes, okay. So we're going to narrow it down pretty quick because your brain knows this stuff and you're already talking to your subconscious. So it'll pop to mind different ideas. Okay, so anxiety about my job. Okay, is this because of this one coworker? No. Wow, I'm surprised. I thought it was. Is this because of management? Yes. Okay, so I didn't realize that, you know. Then you can go in and be like, I would stop at that point and be like, do I need to know more about this situation? Because usually at this point, situations are popping to mind, scenarios are popping to mind. It's like, oh yeah, that was that made me anxious, that made me anxious, I didn't understand that. It's just all replaying in your brain, whether you see images or whether you see like scenario words, just however your brain tells stories. And then your body will probably say no most of the time. In my experience, I'm not the expert here. Well, I am sometimes, but I'm not that.
Yeah.
Anyways, because you already have an idea of what the emotion is and what it entails, and you're like, okay, cool, that's what that's about. And you'll be like, yes, you can release this now. And then you use the magnet over your governing meridian, which is going to be from right about here all the way down your spine to your tailbone. And you do that 3 times. Then you ask, have I released this emotion? Sometimes your body will say no. Like, okay. In that case, I might start asking at that time, is this an ancestral emotion? Because if it's ancestral and it's just related to specific situations in your personal life, but it was handed to you by somebody else, then you need to do the magnet run 10 times and then double check, is this emotion released? Yes. Okay, cool. Then you can take a breath. I usually take a breath at that point, only because like, awesome, okay, let's filter that out, let that go, and then I'm like, okay, is there another emotion I can release right now? And you go back into the whole process. Narrowing down which emotion, asking, do I need to know more about this emotion? And then yes or no, figure out, is this when I was from 0 to 5? You know, the types of questions you can do. Is this from ages this to this? Or has this have to do with my mom? Or does this have to do with what have you? And so usually you can narrow it down. Is this from my past? Is this from a past life, if you're into that kind of thing? Or is this from the ancestral or generational emotion is also a question you can ask at this point if you're just not finding anything. You're like, is this something I was handed when I was conceived? And then in that case, when you release it, it releases from everybody in your line. They're actually pretty kind of cool because that kind of stuff is fun. So is that kind of a lot, or?
No, it answers the question.
Yeah.
2 different things I wanted to touch on, jumping off of what you were talking about.
Yep.
So I just finished Hickson Gracie's book, Breathe. He's a very famous MMA jiu-jitsu guy. He also trained the head instructor at my school back in the Twin Cities, Dave Arnebeck. Jiu-jitsu people care a lot about lineage, so anyway, talk about ancestral.
Cool. Yeah.
But anyway, so he talked about when he was preparing for a fight and he would do his fight camps, at the end of that he would make a little fire and do this, he called it divine meditation. And this, I'm talking about this to bring up getting into that right state to be relaxed and receptive, and it just related to what he was talking about. So he would say a prayer of thanks for being able to represent jiu-jitsu, and he would get into a state of emptiness, peace of mind, and resignation and accepting his fate. So that's like, because it is like jiu-jitsu, an MMA fight, whatever, it is a life and death thing. Like, you can die, but it's also like it sounds weird to people that haven't gone through it, but there is a kind of a peace in kind of accepting that. And instead of being nervous or anxious, he's focused on being comfortable, but then putting that pressure on the opponent, because if you're not comfortable and you're panicking, then you're reacting and you're behind in the fight.
Yes.
So
yeah.
And it's always interesting because like I relate to his book a lot with like how he would talk about how he would go in a fight, because he's not thinking, he's just kind of feeling, and he doesn't know like how he's going to win the fight, but he's just going to recognize the opportunities and creating that pressure, putting the pressure on the opponent and seeing what opens up. So what we're talking about though is getting into that state of emptiness. So like with asking the questions, do you, like, I've heard it said you're supposed to just sit and wait for an answer. Does the answer come from you, or do you actually like hear an inner voice?
Good question. Yeah. Usually I hear an inner voice, but I actually use the form of muscle testing to be able to double, triple check everything. Because you're talking to your own subconscious doesn't necessarily have a voice to speak back. Sometimes you do if you have claircognizance, I believe, better developed. So that can be the case. Usually I like to rely on the muscle response in the body. So I actually stand within a foot of a wall, somehow with my feet. I have to go in and actually find a way to relax my feet and my knees and my hips and my ankles, all of those things. And then my torso needs to be in decent alignment. And so not like, slouched over as we might sit half the time. But, and then after that, I usually use breath excessively to completely clear. So when I ask a question, I take in a breath. Is this emotion in column A? And by that time, your body will have swayed. Forward is yes, because what you are naturally attracted to, you go towards. Your subconscious will attract to you what you want. And if your subconscious is deterred from it, it sways away. Naturally, easily done when someone has a thing right near your face or something like that. You don't want that to hit you, so you naturally sway away. Versus if someone hands you cake, you naturally go towards it. Or something like that, yeah. And the subconscious can communicate clearer in that way. They have to be yes or no questions. So no gray area, short story answer kind of things to be expected in this particular situation.
Right.
That's in other areas. But here it's more of the yes or no, and so you ask specific, straightforward, clear questions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what was super interesting, because you did this to me in the past, and then I've also tried it, and like just against the wall too. So you can do this solo, or you can have a person kind of walk you through it. But what was super interesting to me is you're saying is this in column A? And even if you're not looking at the chart, your brain just knows what's on the chart, even if you don't have it memorized, which is so interesting.
Yeah. The body can communicate in many ways which we aren't really aware of in Western civilization as much, though I think a lot of it can be related to jujitsu and stuff like that, because your body's naturally responding to things and you're inside of more of a, for lack of a better phrase, instinctual moment, where you just response.
Yeah.
And we aren't really as aware of that in the West. So essentially it's the same idea as if someone walks into a room that's very flamboyant, outgoing. Everyone notices, even if their back is turned to the door. They're like, whoa, what just happened? Same thing kind of happens if someone who walks in who's always an Eeyore, gloomy, sad. You still notice, you're like, what just dulled this down? I don't understand. The room feels thicker or heavy, or however you want to describe it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times if you're able to identify the environment you are currently in on a regular basis, like when you walk in the front door, how does it make you feel? You communicate in that way. Most people aren't trained to listen to that kind of a thing.
And for people who think that sounds kind of woo-woo, just a pretty common one is you walk into a room where two people have been fighting or arguing, you can feel that tension, and that's a very easy one to pick up on.
Yeah, very much, absolutely. Versus you walk into a room where husband, wife have been hugging and being all cute and cuddly, and you're like, oh god, this is ew. Same idea though. You still pick up on the fact that there is something going on.
Right. And another thing I wanted to bring up, that with the subconscious knowing, when Rachel was doing the water magnet emotion release to me, she wasn't talking at all. She was just running through the questions what do they call it, sub-vocally or whatever.
In my head, I was asking him to his subconscious.
She was asking him, but not saying the words. And then the way with the muscle testing, she was having me hold my arm out, and she would say, is there a problem when age 15 to 20 or whatever? And she would push, and I would get that weak response, meaning yes. Or if it was a strong response, like it was a no, my body would hold up the arm strong. So without even verbally talking, and doing it that way, she was saying, was good, because then there's not our own egos getting in the way. It's just that communication. But it was just whoa.
Yeah, that one's a tough one. It's hard to explain to someone who hasn't really experienced or thought on that train, anywhere close to that kind of train of thought, to how that response is. I started going into quantum physics, quantum mechanics, quantum anything, and you start to kind of get a semblance of idea. Now I'm, again, this much quantum, all right? So the idea is the concept, sharing the idea of the concept, how you relate via energy, how you look at frequencies, how a rock has a frequency and how it communicates with its grass around it. in its own way, it's different. Now, is that like me talking to you? No, not at all. It's its own rock thing. And it helps to also kind of maybe think of life in dimensions, and this is very difficult for some of my dear friends who are also more religiously minded, for lack of a better phrase. No disrespect at all.
Yeah.
Just kind of difficult to understand. But if you think of it in dimensional, like energy, frequency, it helps a lot too. And that's essentially what quantum kind of deals with, is you are all frequency. The fact that we see and we can touch and feel is because it's in the third dimensional form of frequency. If it up levels into a different form of frequency, then it manifests in a different way. I think fourth is like light. So you communicate in a different way when you're a light being, I think.
Yeah.
It might be fifth, I can't remember.
Yeah, because I thought time was fourth.
Sorry,
anyway,
not perfect.
Yeah, again, we have this much knowledge of it.
Enough to get the idea and grasp it, so how I can use it for myself and share with friends.
So there's a 2 video game series called The World Ends With You.
Oh, okay.
And the bad guys are monsters called Noise. And you have like this pin, like literally like one of those buttons you just put on your shirt or whatever, and there's one that lets you like hear the thoughts of the crowd. It takes place in Shibuya in Tokyo, Japan.
Oh, okay.
And so people are affected by the noise, like and in the second game there's different emotions with different types of noise. So it's like someone's depressed or angry or whatever, there's like blue, purple, red, but whatever emotion, green, and then you fight the noise and that helps them feel better. And there's this lore and like there's a lot of cool stuff that relates to stuff you're talking about, because there's like angel type people that talk, and if you get these secret reports, you get more of the lore. So anyway, the ascended beings get to a lower frequency to interact with people on Earth. So it's like there's stuff out there, and it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be either or with traditional religion. It's like, I do consider myself a Lutheran Christian, but I also think that there's a lot of stuff we don't understand, and that's why I like to explore these other topics. So
generally, I also consider myself a form of Christianity, but in general, I think Christianity is this big, and I think some of this is this big, and that's the easiest way I can explain it.
How do you make it so you can actually hear that subconscious voice if you're asking those questions?
Sure. Muscle testing started it for me, because then my body was physically moving to answer. If you do this on a regular basis with yourself, you'll eventually hear yourself say, yeah, as you sway forward, or yeah, no way, or whatever your brain says to yourself, as you sway backwards. And so it kind of automatically starts hearing the voice say it as you are muscle testing. And then after that, for me, there was a long period of just doing the random stuff that popped into my head without questioning. This is starting the exploration of discernment. Now, I'm not talking about doing crazy, insane stuff, but like a good example was I was driving home one day and my head's like, turn there. I was like, but I just go straight normally. Like, okay, I'll turn. All right, I'll turn there. I'll get home that way instead of going this way. And no big deal, no harm on me, and I have no clue exactly why, but I was like, okay. But doing that a little bit at a time in those very obviously safe situations where there's no crazy, like, move to Florida. Yeah, no, maybe not. Maybe not that one. Okay. Though I have had that one. Anyways, doing those kind of little things will gradually make the voice louder over time. You have to develop it, as it also has been smushed down 80 to 90 to 99% of the time. Everyone has at some point said no way to their brain and shut it off to some degree, some way, some form. It's like, no, I have to do this. I don't want to, but I have to do this. Shush into your brain somehow. Well, to recultivate hearing that, you actually have to do what your brain says occasionally. So if it means taking a different turn than you normally take, okay, do it, because you may not know. And it may be nothing. that it also may be something. Either way, the idea is you're listening to yourself and you're like, oh, I heard that, I'm now going to respond, not question. And developing that'll take years.
Yeah.
And obviously gaining discernment, which I'm 100% a fan of, highly recommend that, is a happens through practice. Kind of a thing of beauty, honestly. As you get better at hearing things for you yourself, you can sometimes hear things about other people. Like, I was at a family reunion once, and one of my cousins was like, yeah, I had the feeling someone was pregnant. It turned out one of my other cousins was pregnant, and we didn't know. It's like, okay, so eventually some of these kinds of things start to become these weird coincidences when they're not actually coincidences.
Right.
Use your judgment. Don't go around proclaiming someone's pregnant, for example. I mean, you can mention it if it comes up. It's like, yeah, I just had that feeling, and then someone will announce it later. Okay, cool. But, like, this is not the time to be using these as blanket statements that everyone has to follow. These are not things that are, as you could see in an unbalanced person, someone going crazy about, you know?
Right, yeah. And
Just to say.
That's the hard, a big thing with all this is, like, it's going to be subtle.
Mm-hmm.
So, because, like, all the stuff, like, people I've interviewed / stuff I've read, like, you need to ask the questions, and then sit and be quiet.
Yeah.
And, like, for me, I've brought it up, like, I journal, and sometimes that helps kind of bring stuff out, and I don't think I'm actually hearing a voice yet. I don't know if I'll get to that point, but, like, when I've done the muscle testing with just standing in front of a wall, I definitely get the swaying, and I've had strong sways where it's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Or it's like, no, that's not it.
Right.
So when we're talking about kind of decoding yourself and learning to recognize that voice, another facet that we should talk about is, like, not judging it is just because you said, like, don't, turn here. I don't want to turn here. It's like, so we're talking about the concept of kind of beating yourself up versus being kind to yourself, and just that pattern people have of, like, ignoring or squashing that voice. So, like, how do you go about that?
A couple of things on that point, actually. So there's a book called The Untethered Soul. If you want to read it, you can. It's basically shares the idea that if you hear it from yourself, it's not actually you talking. And that definitely flies in the face of what I was just saying, so let me explain. When you're out and about at the grocery store and you're like, I could get that, but I don't really think I need that. Do I need that? I could go get that. Or milk. Were we out of milk? I can't remember if we were out of milk. And you generally just have that nonsense just blah, blah, blah going through your head all the time. That isn't necessarily the voice we're talking about. That's the noise, actually. Exactly. And it can be influenced by exterior everything. So understanding there are two different parts of your brain that are working. One's listening and one's talking. Mm-hmm. It's not always a bad thing. It can be sometimes true you talking and you listening. But the idea is to start understanding there's a dichotomy there, unfortunately, in my experience at least. So when you start kind of hearing these random things that you genuinely have zero logical thought to back up at all, why? That's the voice we're talking about. And then a lot of people are gifted in multiple different ways. It's not always a voice in your head that you hear. Sometimes it's seeing, sometimes it's smelling, sometimes it's hearing, just like you hear random things other people don't necessarily hear sometimes. A feeling is definitely the thing. These are all your clairs, claircognizant, clairvoyant, that stuff. I can't remember them all. People are naturally gifted in different areas of those. You can develop all of them, but if you want to, if you put in the time. But in general, you're going to have something you generally tend towards and be like, oh yeah, like, I hear stuff sometimes that other people don't necessarily hear. In not a creepy, weird horror movie way, but like, wait, did you say that? I just heard that blah, 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 kind of a thing. The voice, I always think of the voice in your head, hearing seeing, smelling, and then just feeling. That's kind of the weird motions I do with it, just to kind of imagine the energy moving for myself. So when you have your nonstop running talk in your head that's easily influenced by noise, that's not necessarily your perfect inner self, that can oftentimes become the voice in your head from what you heard as a kid.
Yeah.
A lot of times, for me, it was my mom would say stuff and then I'd hear myself saying it back, or I would hear myself thinking it back to myself. And it was not always positive, which everyone has their issues, it's totally fine. But you have your person, you're like, oh yeah, they always beat themselves up out loud. Well, that's going to influence you some way, and then that ended up in your head at some point. If you choose to go source it, I should say. The voice in your head is still talking. But if you decide to think, okay, where did this come from? You can figure that stuff out. And understanding that those two sides of your brain are both powerful. Your brain will listen to the words and take them 100% black and white. What you say, even if it's in jest to another person, it matters. So if you decide to change how you speak to yourself on purpose, consciously, so like you get it, for me it would be like, man, why'd I do that? I feel so dumb. Okay, let's automatically clear that out and change it to, man, why did I do that? Let's look for an answer. There's a solution here. That's how I started. Now it's like, just shut that down and be like, I am good, I actually use I am confident, I am worthy, I am enough. Those types of affirmation things to just reprogram the brain, be like, no, you don't need to beat yourself up. That takes a lot of effort mentally to notice when you're beating yourself up and then actually actively change it. The truth of the matter is the vast majority of people actually operate 90% of the time in their subconscious. And then their conscious mind is actually like twice as powerful. But you have to activate it to use it. And so retraining old habits is oftentimes stated as something you can't do because the person ultimately isn't willing to use their conscious mind to go and retrain the old habits. So if you wake up every single day at the same time, you go to work at the same time, you eat the same meals, you do all the same things every single day, which is totally fine if that's what you want to do it. Understand you're not operating in conscious thought pretty much ever through that type of thing. So if you want to actually change a habit in yourself, like drinking soda 7 times a day, I don't know, whatever it is. You're like, okay, well, I have to actively choose, this is water, not soda, okay, and that takes effort. And most people today don't like putting in effort. So retraining that is possible, the beating yourself up versus the being kind to yourself. Bring it back. And but it takes a lot of effort and self-awareness and understanding on what are my triggers? Is this a trigger? Where does this come from? How do I deal with this? Talking to yourself back and forth, your true self, not your brain. I call it my anxiety voice, is actually what it is. There's this thing that goes, oh, watch out, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, don't need to listen to that. And and that comes with practice. You're not always right, especially when you just start identifying things. But yeah, doing something is better than doing nothing. And figuring it out, I think, is ultimately a personal goal. It's easier if you're dealing with one person. You're like, okay, this is what you struggle with. Cool. This is how we can approach it. When this happens, do this. But it's really hard to generalize.
Yeah. And I want to plug Jessica from How to ADHD again, because she has a really good video about what does self-care look like. And what was good and enlightening for me was, like, you say self-care, and like with the pandemic and everything, people think it means like bubble baths and have that chocolate and whatever. And it can actually mean just kind of setting yourself up for, like, and like you mentioned, having routines of like same time waking up and whatever. So, and I'm on the side of like, I like routine. In the previous podcast we talked about that. But sometimes that can help kind of clear up bandwidth for doing the work on the other hard stuff.
It can.
So, it's and kind of like everything, it's like, what's the purpose or intent behind it? Like, are you just taking the easy way and doing what you always done, or are you making it easy so you can work on this other stuff. So anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that comes with knowing how you operate best.
Yes.
100%. Yep.
So, but when you're doing all this inner work, like I just want to share a story about like the first time I started doing cardio consistently post college.
Oh, sure.
I just remember my brain fighting me so hard every single day, and like, don't want to get on the bike. Okay, I did the bike for like 10 minutes, that's good enough, whatever. And I just stuck with it, and I remember it was the Wednesday of either like, I don't remember if it was the second or the third week, and it's just all of a sudden switched, and it was the part of the workout I was looking forward to the most. It was like it was a distinct day where that switch happened that I noticed it.
Yeah.
So, so if you're trying all this stuff at home, just keep in mind it, like, you know, might take a few times. It's very hard to change yourself. So if you have like a spouse or significant other or friend, whatever, it's like, think about how much work it is for yourself before you start putting all that judgment and whatever on them.
Well, and it's very similar to any type of addiction mentality.
Yeah.
You can be addicted to watching movies. You can be addicted to pretty much anything. That idea is your body's addicted to one response. Changing it's kind of difficult. And so if you take it from that kind of perspective, at least it helped me kind of like understand why it would take over and over and over and over of reprogramming the same idea over, you know, and it's still not perfect. It'll be forever kind of thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to talk about is like, you started to touch on it with like people planting ideas in your head, or like, are they actually yours? So, and something I've been doing for myself is like reevaluating life goal stuff. So it's like, are these goals I've had since I was 20-year-old Alex, are they still relevant for 30-year-old Alex? So.
Absolutely, and that's actually an extremely good point, because are the decisions and goals you made at 1920 applicable for the rest of your life? A lot of times, and I've done this too, like often actually, I had to reevaluate, be like, do I really want what I wanted when I was 16, 17, 18, 19, 20? Is that really what I want from it? Like, logically looking at it now, it's like, no way, dude. Why would I let a 19-year-old run my life, you know? Let's go in and be like, I've learned some things, and let's chill out on that particular topic and go over here where it's much more helpful, or what have you. Yeah. You know? Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I'll just bring this up as another side. This is way out of order, but
sure.
Dragon Ball Z.
Okay.
There's an episode in the Frieza arc, for the nerds watching, where there's a character called Captain Ginyu. Goku's the main character. Ginyu has this power to swap bodies. So he steals Goku's body because Goku's that much stronger and he's kicking his ass.
Yeah.
So, but when Ginyu is in Goku's body, he's not able to be anywhere near as like strong or powerful, and so Goku in the Ginyu body talks about like, well, if your mind and your body and your spirit aren't in sync, you're not. So I guess I wanted to have us talk about like just being in sync with your body, so like you communicate, so then getting in sync with that. And listening is the first step, but then where do you go from there?
Acceptance to some degree, and I would say this actually goes back to the book Loving What Is. We had talked about it, I think, last time. Is it true? Is it really true? That whole sequence of questions. Because ultimately, to put yourself in sync, you have to understand where you're at physically, where you're at mentally, where you're at spiritually, and then kind of bring it all full circle. So if you're mentally thinking, yes, I want to have the body of Barbie, that would be amazing. Let's all go be Barbie.
Right.
Okay, reality says, no way, dude, like she couldn't actually stand, okay? Reality's like, no. Okay, so that's out of sync, very obviously, but for sake of the storyline. So you can go and work out as much as you want. You can go and do all sorts of different things to change the shape of your body, and all sorts of probably very unhealthy, dangerous things, which I should never recommend ever, to create this idea, but it's never going to be true to you, because it's never actually real with what you are physically capable of, how you're naturally shaped, how you're actually built to operate, what foods nourish your body the best, what type of activity is best for you. For you, it's MMA. For me, it's more like yoga, qigong, okay? It's different, but it's totally cool. Very similar, though, in many ways, right?
Yeah.
CrossFit is another one. I CrossFit for years. Loved it. My body did not. So I have no qualms with CrossFit whatsoever. I love them dearly. But my body said, maybe you should chill. Like, okay, all right, listening to my body. Doing all of those kinds of peeling back of the onion on yourself over time creates coherence. There are also a lot of ways you can meditate. You can Google lots of different, you can do qigong. That'll balance your energy system. You could Google or find Dr. Joe Dispenza. He has some amazing meditations that kind of bring in heart-brain coherence, which are usually the two out of sync most of the time. There's a lot of different ways you could find it. Prayer is an option. Becoming fully aware of what is and then what you are, whether you like it or not, accepting it, and then moving yourself towards where you want to be, understanding that is not where you are and yet is possible. Realistic goals, smart goals, they say.
Yeah.
I've never been good at them because I never had a full understanding of what I'm actually capable of. It's like, well, I want to do that ridiculous nonsense, but it's never going to happen, so this can't be a smart goal, even if I set a deadline. It's...
Right.
That's been my process, how I've done it. It's not necessarily clear, succinct, or easy, but that's how I've kind of come about to it. Lots of books, lots of meditations, lots of self-discovery. There is a period in time in life where you just kind of do whatever you want to figure out the consequences, how it responds, different ideas like that. Okay, do you eat the 7 pounds of chocolate? Okay, you're like, yes, go for it. You're going to have to deal with the consequences. That's learning discretion and understanding of your body and how that really affects you, and that will never do good things for you. 7 pounds is ridiculous, but that kind of idea, Yes.
With kind of qigong, yoga, meditation, massage, cardio, whatever, I guess I don't know what percentage of people like having like a external program that they follow versus like just kind of being, because not everybody knows enough about the world of fitness to kind of know what to do and how to progress and respond to what they need. So I think there's a lot of value in that, to just be like, okay, this is my program, I'm going to do it. Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot of mental friction to overcome to doing that. Mm-hmm. But I think as you get more advanced, because we've both been in the fitness game for a long time now, mm-hmm. and I think higher level people get to that point where it's more training off of intuition and responding to what the body needs, instead of like, let's just take the CrossFit example, because it's pretty common that it's very external, hard, like push your body, which is, there's a lot of value in that, but if you're not balancing out with the softer stuff, you're going to break down and get injured, mm-hmm. which CrossFit has a lot of injuries. Not that other sports.
It doesn't technically, but it can if you do it wrong.
Yeah.
But yes, in general, yes. I was never very balanced while doing CrossFit. They say 4 days a week, I'm going to go 4 days a week, and I was exhausted. I needed to nap daily, and I couldn't, because I had to work and do other things.
Right.
So it's if you're able to handle learning about yourself in that environment, which I was able to learn a lot, mm-hmm. And then kind of learn how to balance it and learn what your body actually needs. And then I think it's just a lifelong process. As you try something new, action is the cure for anxiety in many situations. If you're going to think, oh, what if I tried this? Just try it.
Yeah.
And then you'll see if you're good at it, if you're not. If it doesn't work, okay, cool, do something else, but do something. And then listen as you get, as you get further along, you start to hear your body be like, well, I'm not feeling it today, like actually because I'm sore and my joints are kind of not feeling good to do blah 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 blah. Mm-hmm. Or I'm just tired and lazy, I feel like doing this, but no, I need to actually go work out. There's a separate issue. And learning how to distinguish that, you learn by doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because a lot of times when they're like, when you're most tired is when you need to push harder. not just in CrossFit, but in any fitness. It's like, yeah, that's true, except when you're truly at a point where your body's going to break down, that's only a place you can find for yourself.
Yeah. And one thing I read from Mike Cernovich that I really liked with that is, if you're not feeling like working out, just go for like a fast walk for like 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of judge from there, because that's long enough to kind of warm up and get into it and have that initial action to overcome that mental resistance. Mm-hmm. But with walking at a fast pace, you'll be able to tell, like, oh, I really can't handle more, or hey, I'm actually feeling good, and that can kind of be a good way to distinguish it. So that's what I like to do if I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Leave a comment if you find another way you like.
Try it. Yeah, go do something.
Yes. And give it a real honest effort. Not like, oh, I did my push-up, I'm good.
Yeah, yeah.
See you next week.
The memes, now I laugh at them too, but the memes where they're like, I'm sorry, but we just aren't going to work out. I hate this. I'm just not feeling good. And the trainer's like, it was one sit-up. Yeah. You know, that whole, it's hysterical, but like,
right.
Okay, get over yourself. In reality, if that's your situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I have one more question that I don't know if you'll be able to answer, but like, are you able to explain the difference, or is there a difference between like your mind and your spirit or soul?
Overall, I would say yes. Because logical thinking is your mind. Your soul, who you truly are, your true self, if you're able to sit down, learn how to hear it, is going to usually be very different in what it says. Because logically, things won't make any sense sometimes. But you'll be like, I really need to do that, or I really want to do this. And yeah, I would definitely say a spirit or a soul is what I think differentiates humans from all other animals. And in that they don't necessarily have the spirit. They have their own version of instinctual thought each. They can also have their own level of intelligence in their own mind and their own form of logic per se. But I don't think they truly have a spirit or a soul. Granted, you can disagree. That's fine.
Yeah.
But that's generally what I would say differentiates humans, and it is different because if you sit down and think about, well, this is how I've kind of come to the conclusion, I should say. You sit down and think about what is developed inside of most traditional public and even private schooling systems is the logical brain. They want you to be able to problem solve. They want you to be able to take this and create that, and they want you to take data points and come up with a solution. Very logical, very straightforward, very teachable, and quantifiable to some degree, whether you know it or you don't, right? Versus your spirit is going to kind of move in different ways, and it's going to have its own unpredictability and its own will to some degree. Whereas like I felt called to go to musical theater. Okay, not everyone gets that. That's very weird for most people, actually. It's very strange to be like, okay, if I don't sing today, I'm going to have a problem with like an emotion being blocked in somewhere in my throat or something like that. And that's not always every day, but examples.
Yes.
Whereas other people are like, if I sing today, I will literally die. Like, it's just how some people operate. Like, that's the last thing I could ever imagine. If I was the last human on earth, that's not what I would turn to doing. You know, it's your own spirit, your own will, your own personality, your own kind of what creates you is its own thing. And I think that's all kind of different aspects of a similar spectrum.
Yeah. Well, and, I wanted to bring up like the Three Ninjas, one of my favorite movies. They talk about the mind, body, spirit, and heart. So, I mean, body, obvious. Mind, we just talked about logic and spirit. I guess to me, heart would mean like your connections with people, relationships and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I also wanted to talk about, like, you talked about if you're gonna sing, if you don't sing, you're gonna die, or if you do sing, you're gonna die. And it's just interesting talking about, like, earlier when we were talking about like listening to yourself with, I'm gonna turn left and whatever, and like suppressing that versus like just listening and going and trying stuff. And that can be creative stuff, it can be trying a new food, or I don't know, like what's his name, Ben something from Nerd Fitness talks about like having the 5 seconds of courage to just and like jump off the diving board or whatever. So
yeah, I very much firmly believe courage is a decision, not a lifestyle. You decide if you're going to make the courageous action, and it takes about 5 to 10 seconds. Then you do it.
Yeah.
But the deciding is the courage. Because doing it isn't necessarily, if you're splitting hairs, the courageous part. Because you're like, nope, I'm going to put my hand up to say hi to this person. That's scary. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, do I really want to meet this person? Hi. And then you're in a conversation. All you have to do then is not be weird.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's...
Yeah. For my brother's bachelor party, we went to Wisconsin Dells, and I was afraid going on a lot of the water slides, but I was like, well, I'm with my brother and his friends, we're going to be here to make it a good day, and it's like that, like, commitment, like, you don't have to go on the slide, I'm going on the slide.
Yeah.
And there's one where they, like, lock you into this tube, and then the floor drops out from under you to shoot you down, and it's like, oh my god. But it's again, it's like it's that 10 seconds to actually step in the tube instead of walking all the way back down the stairs, and it's like, it's gonna happen, okay.
Here we go. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, and another thing that you talked about, like that courage of reaching out and shaking hands. So one thing I want to say with that is, it doesn't matter how the conversation goes. The fact is you tried.
Yeah.
And like, you made a best friend, you're never going to talk to him again. Doesn't matter. You don't know how it's going to shake out, but that's not the point. It's the process and that decision.
100%. Exactly.
Like, one of my favorite interviews I did was with Dave Burgess, who wrote Teach Like a Pirate.
Okay.
And he has a TED Talk on the same topic, but what I'll bring up is, he says, like, for example, if he teaches a civil rights unit, is it more important that they know what was in the Civil Rights Act of 1968, or is it important that they know, like, you treat people well regardless of race, and there's this stuff throughout history that kind of built racial disparities, or whatever, all the issues, or do you need to know, like, the logical, the boring,
right,
whatever. So
right.
Yeah.
And that's why I think a lot of public school does a huge disservice to society. This is a little bit of a branch off, but because all they're going to test you on is the quantifiable items that you may or may not know, but they never actually teach you how to be a good human.
Right.
In many situations.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a side topic, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I did do a podcast, I'll link below, with like the death of creativity that you might like checking out. And it's just interesting because, like, there's this huge push in society for, like, STEM, all logic, math, computers, technology, and then it's like, but then you look at, like, all these people searching for engineering or programming jobs where you don't have to talk to people, and it's like, you need to learn how to be a human. It's like, well, that's the liberal arts stuff that you were shitting on for years. The
highest paid engineers ever are the ones with the best people skills.
Yeah.
That you can find exactly quoted in how to win friends and influence people. That's in that book exactly. And the only way you're going to make a lot of money is if you have good people skills, and if you actually go in and decide to develop them, which is hard because so many people don't. And there's very few places I've found that are good guides to learning them and what that even means. People skills, what does that mean? And it's that's a whole separate topic.
It very much is, and I did do a podcast about that too, and it's hard because it's like, I developed what I think are pretty high level people skills, but it takes a lot of work, and it is not in the linear path. Like, you read this book and it's like you have to reflect on how interactions went, and it's hard, and so it's
the only way to learn truly good people skills is to go out and publicly mess up a lot.
Yeah.
Like, every conversation. You have to be willing to go out and put yourself on the line with some random stranger and be like, yeah, I'm gonna be okay if this completely blows. Like,
yeah, and I think that's huge. And it's like, so something when people meet me is like, something you told me was, I have the energy of like a dog when I meet people, and I'm like, hi, we're friends now. Like, and I take a lot of pride in that, because I try to bypass the small talk, because so one thing that I read somewhere was, don't ask questions that you don't care about the answers to. So when people do like, you know, how are you? Either you actually want to know, or don't ask that question. So I hate that question.
Yeah.
Or just like, how's work going? It's like, versus like, what have you been working on? And it's like, if you don't have interesting shit going on in your life, that's a you problem, and we may not be compatible.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same idea as I actually read an article that had a brilliant point of asking kids, where are you going to college?
Yeah.
Versus, do you have anything excited planned for after graduation? There's a huge difference. It's like, no, I'm not going to college. Well, that invites 10,000 different reasons for them to, and especially in Minnesota, passive-aggressively decide what you're doing. Whereas actually you gave it great thought and talked it out with your own personal mentors, parents, whoever's important to you at the time, and you're going to have this plan. Like,
instead of that judgmental, oh,
yeah. Oh my gosh, such a...
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a bunch more rabbit holes we're going to try not to step in.
Right.
I do want to do one about Qigong, if
Sure.
you're up for that, but it doesn't have to be today.
I have not done much study on it.
Oh, okay.
But I plan on it. That's kind of like
Yeah.
my yearly thing. This year I'm going to be doing more learning on what Qigong is and how to do
Sure.
it and what it is and
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
All right, but you
Yeah.
can wrap it up, and thanks for being on the show again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun.